So before I continue this sort of response to Lauren and Zerse here, I wanted to mention sort of it's not really a secondary point, but it goes along with how I ended the other video, talking about how the assumption of this system where men and women just could get along, but they don't want to because they want to see the worst in each other, how that just completely falls apart once you recognize what gynocentrism is. The other caveat to that, it's not even a caveat, it's just another point, is that men are systemically discriminated against. So that's the difference here. When women talk about their bad experiences with men, the main reason for those bad experiences is poor choices in mate selection, right? Poor choices of who to get pregnant by. You slept with the guy you shouldn't have, right? Women want to go for whatever guy they're sexually attracted to, like the bad boys or the guys that they see as having money, right? Or being the most masculine, whatever it is for a particular woman. And then they want to blame the consequences on men or not take accountability for it, at least in many cases. But that's their fault, right? There's a lot of men out there that are decent men because men basically know that they can't act shitty. And, well, sometimes they can, right? If they're the alphas, they can sort of act like crap and women will stay with them. But that's the whole point. Women have the ability to choose decent men. They're not systemically, whichever word you want to use, discriminated against by the system. The system rewards them and basically allows them to not take accountability pretty much no matter what they do, right? If a woman cheats on a man, he didn't spend enough time with her, or he didn't make enough for her, he didn't deserve her anyway. But if a man cheats on a woman, he's a pig and he's a womanizer and all this kind of stuff. So, again, there are plenty of decent guys out there for women to choose if they wanted to be with those men. They just would rather not choose those men and then blame somebody else, usually that man or anybody other than themselves, when, they get knocked up by that type of guy who is just a bad boy or whatever the case may be. And I get that there's a variety of relationship outcomes that happen, right? I get that life is what it is in terms of the relationships that you have with people. It's not always the woman's fault completely, in other words. But women do have a huge advantage in that the system favors them. They can choose whatever man they want, and then if they get pregnant, again, even after this whole Supreme Court decision in the United States, you can still go to a leftist state and have an abortion. Men have no options whatsoever because they have no reproductive rights. So men are sharing stories not just of their bad experiences with women per se, but how the system itself has discriminated against them, how they weren't given a fair opportunity or chance, how they lost custody of their kids because the woman lied about bad things that he supposedly did but actually didn't do, or how essentially, he was a domestic violence victim himself and no one cared because he was a man. And again, Lauren even touches upon some of these issues with the clip that she recorded years ago. So I know that she's aware of this stuff, and I'm sure that Zerse is as well. So that is a huge difference. Men are spreading information, not just of their own personal emotional reactions, right? That seems to be the assumption here. It's like, oh, this woman did this, and that hurt me, right? It's kind of the whole who hurt you argument at that point. That's not what it is. It's, I went through this experience, I did everything the way I was supposed to. Maybe there were some red flags I should have seen, and maybe there weren't. Maybe my friends all said that this was a good woman. Maybe I did what, the church in my, basically in my community told me that I should do. And I got with this supposedly good woman, and then she cheated on me anyway. And then she took me for half of everything I had anyway, right? That's the difference. Is that the system itself discriminates against men, and men are sharing their experiences and figuring out, oh crap, not only are the majority of women corrupted by the society that we live in because they can get away with acting shitty and there's no change in behavior, right? Like there's no negative consequences. So most women act like that to begin with now, but the system itself discriminates against us. Women can make up a lot of different things and just ruin our lives very easily, or they can just have a one-sided relationship where they don't do anything, right? And men will, share stories of their married life before they got a divorce, and it's just like, yeah, she didn't do anything for me. Everything was pretty much just a risk and a liability, and we finally got divorced. I'm glad it's over, right? The system and the culture itself is so anti-male that it's giving men plenty of legitimate reasons for not wanting to be a part of this. Now, let's finally, after that long ramble from both the last part of the first video and what I've mentioned here, let's actually continue with this dialogue.
That's going to perhaps give them a different view on life. Once again, just to speak to like the cult, because I do want to answer this, since this Undead Chronic guy made a claim that I think is really interesting. These people have the most cult-like dynamics. He said,
of course, MGTOW's a cult, right? Even though Undead Chronic really isn't MGTOW, but, you know, whatever. He's kind of MGTOW-ish, I guess. But again, just these sort of accusations of these people are all radical and they're doing things for this crazy reason. Nope. Most of the guys that are going their own way, or most of the people, most of the men that are advocating for their rights through the men's rights movement, whatever strategy you have, right? Whatever sort of camp you fit into, most of them are doing it because they realize they're being discriminated against. Unlike feminism, which is basically based on patriarchy theory, which is a bunch of nonsense. The idea that men have just oppressed women throughout all history, and now women deserve free stuff, and men are bad, and men need to, you know, treat them special still, but women can also do everything a man can do, and they don't need us, but we still need to do it all, right? All these things that make no sense that feminists tend to believe in, that is based on nonsense. It's based on a fantasy. Whereas men's issues are not based on a fantasy. They're based on actual evidence and observations from the real world. That's the huge difference here.
you horrible feminist woman, Lauren, you send your lawyers after men. You try to ruin men's lives. Well, what happened here was actually Sandman MGTOW many years ago published a video about me that was completely false. It was, I can't remember the exact claims in it, but it was like, I think it was like a part of the claims that I had slept with all these men to write my content for me and whatnot. Yeah.
Definitely.
And just like completely false, not a stick of evidence. All of these claims that came out about me when I left politics, ooh, we're going to have a fun time with this in my manifesto. A lot of people made them knowing full well I couldn't respond, and people would just take my silence as confirmation.
Yeah, you know, first of all, I don't have any idea what she's talking about with her manifesto, whether that would be interesting or not, but essentially my whole take on Sandman, she's going to describe it a little bit more here with this issue, is she responded to a video that Sandman made about her, and in her email she like immediately said, if you don't take this down, I'm going to threaten litigation. Like she in a nice way, and she's going to describe it here. Maybe I should have waited till she finished her explanation. She basically, in a nice way, said, hey, you know, this isn't true, and I'm just going to take your video down through legal force if I can, so please just take it down first. It really reminds me of the whole, you know, the whole sort of trope of someone going into a business and saying, it's an awful nice place you have here. You know, being real nice about it, at least in terms of disposition, right, or pretending to be nice about it. This is a nice place you have here. It'd be a shame for something to happen to it. That's kind of what this reminds me of a little bit. It's like you're trying to pretend to be nice, but you're really taking preemptive action right from the beginning. And so, you know, I don't know. I don't have an opinion too strongly on this because I'm not into making a video that speculates about someone. You know, I can't see myself ever saying, Lauren Southern slept with all these men and now she's going to do, you know, she's going to get pregnant and whatever. Who cares, right? Like, I don't make videos or content like that. Like, as far as I would probably ever go with that kind of thing is what I've said here, where I've said that I don't think Lauren cares about men, because she's not really talking about why men might be walking away legitimately from the system. And again, I don't think she's ever been an MRA. I think that's a fair statement to make. I don't think she's ever really cared about men's issues. She's pointed out the hypocrisy of feminism, but that's not the same thing. You know, I think I've defended my point of view on that pretty well. But in terms of pure speculation, I don't care about that kind of crap. But I also think it's shitty that Lauren just immediately threatened to sue him. The only, and this is sort of maybe like a minor concession or a minor point to make that's kind of in Lauren's favor, is I've never been popular enough to have to deal with people saying Ohio Dan is retarded or whatever the case may be, you know, and he's done all these bad things to people, or, you know, I've never had someone really make a video about how bad, or a negative video about me, so I don't know how I would respond to that necessarily. Or once you become sort of internet popular, whether you get that so often that you learn that you just have to threaten people because it's the only thing that works. That is possible. I will give that sort of concession to her, I guess. But overall, I'd like to think that I wouldn't immediately threaten to sue people. Most likely, I'd just be like, well, that's wrong, and this is wrong too, and that's not correct. And, I tend to pick things apart more than just be like, oh, I'm just going to sue you because you said things about me that weren't true. I don't care what people think about me enough to even think about doing that. I don't. So I do think it's shitty that Lauren immediately went to that. But again, I don't make videos speculating about people because I know that you might get that kind of response for it, and all it does is sort of create drama. So I don't think I'd make a video like that in the first place, to be honest.
Even though they provided no proof for them. So I reached out to Sandman and I was like, hey man, I actually sent him a nice message at first. I was like, hey man,
Nice in the sense of, again, you have a nice business here. Hate for something to happen to it.
You talk a lot about false accusations against men, right? You talk a lot about how men's lives are ruined by bitter women who want to just tear down their reputations. And that's wrong. False accusations should be spoken up against and should be knocked down. And we should want facts before we accuse men of being rapists and send them to jail, correct? That's something you believe in? Of course he believes in that, right? So why, in my situation, would you not ask for a single piece of evidence? Would you just spread this unscrupulous drama and lies with no evidence? Is this not just as bad as trying to ruin a man's life with false accusations? Right? And I basically told him, I was like, listen, I want to ask you to voluntarily take down your video since you provided no proof and it doesn't really fit into your alleged morality to be spreading stuff like this. Otherwise, I can have a defamation lawyer come and take a look at it since this is defamation.
Yeah, we'd like to get you to buy some protection because otherwise something bad could happen to this nice business you have here. It really does remind me of that. But again, it's possible that you have to do that kind of thing in order to get people off your back if you're internet famous. I'm not internet famous. I hope that I never really am. I really like making content and seeing my subscriber list come up slowly, but I'm never going to be internet famous in all likelihood. So it is what it is. I don't know what it's like to be in that position, but like I said, I wouldn't make a video speculating about someone's sexual past or future or whatever, what they're going to do with themselves anyway. So don't think that I would be on the receiving end of that. Still think that it's kind of lousy to immediately threaten someone like that, though.
And he took down the video voluntarily. And then and I actually sent him a thank you after. I sent him a thank you. I was like, man, that's actually really classy of you. That's really cool of you to stand by your principles and values of not spreading false information about people with no proof. And then after I sent that message thinking he just did it voluntarily to stay consistent, he went and did a huge post to his audience saying, Lauren Southern forced me legally to take down the truth about her. She is just another horrible feminist whore trying to ruin men's lives. And I'm like, wow.
So
you
a lot of
guys,
sensationalism.
absolutely.
There's a lot of
These
sensationalism I noticed on the internet.
Bad
There's
people,
so much.
bad people, not good people. They're
Again, I don't really care a whole lot about this particular issue other than I didn't see what the email said, but if Lauren really threatened him that right off the bat, it's probably not. Like I say, I just don't really care. That's kind of a silly thing to be involved in to begin with, because why are you... Again, I just wouldn't make a video like that in the first place.
They're leading men down a horrible path because, of course, his whole grift is just all women are evil and hating women. So in any situation where he might be in the wrong, he can't admit it.
No, I don't think that's true whatsoever. And again, this goes into the whole MGTOW / men's rights activists hate women, just like the feminist hate men type of stuff. Speaking of making accusations that really are baseless, I don't think that's true with Sandman. Sandman just sort of understands female nature pretty well, and he's pretty much done dealing with it. That's my interpretation, right? I'm not saying I agree with everything that Sandman says, but he does realize a lot of the core key things about the differences between men and women. I've learned quite a bit from his channel. Again, I don't always agree with him, And, I wouldn't make a speculation video about someone to that degree probably, but, ultimately, again, I don't really care a whole lot about this, but no, I don't think Sandman does hate women. Just like most MGTOWs and MRAs don't hate women or think that women are evil, they just rationally look at what's going on in our gynocentric society and choose to opt out. And especially, again, Zerse and Lauren were talking to start off with more about society and opting out of wanting to defend society as a whole. I'm focusing more on the manosphere aspect of it here, but yeah, men really have very little reason to want to take on the liability and risk that a serious relationship with a woman brings. You don't have to hate women or think women are evil to get to that point. You just have to realize where things actually stand.
Because I'm the woman in this situation, right? And feminists do the same shit. They do the same shit. They're all the same.
Right. They're all the same on both sides because men and women could work things out. It's just these radical extreme people that are making other people radical extreme and extreme, right? No, it's not the same on both sides because men are getting the short end of the stick when it comes to almost everything that's important, and that's real, whereas patriarchy theory and the wage gap and mansplaining, those things are fake, and they have absolutely no parity with losing access to your kids, having higher suicide rates, higher homelessness rates, basically having a society that doesn't give a shit about you and doesn't give you any sort of benefit for trying to actually build a life with a woman or having a family, because basically if you have children with a woman, you're giving her children for all intents and purposes. You have to fight and scrap and scrape to even be part of their lives. Why even do that in the first place if you haven't done that so far? Why? Once you realize that, we have a society where men are always basically expected to do more and get very little in return for it and are systematically discriminated against, why in the world would you think that that's the same as patriarchy theory and all the other nonsense, right? It's just, I'm not saying that women have no issues. They don't have issues that are to the extreme of men not having reproductive rights, gender roles being so incredibly skewed and one-sided. They don't have issues aside from their biology, right? That's really the biggest issue that women have now, is their biology, because there's only so much we can do to mitigate the fact that women are generally physically weaker than men. There's only so much we can do to mitigate the fact that women are the ones that get pregnant, right? With the level of technology and advancement that we currently have in our society today. There's only so much that we can do to make it to where, women basically are comfortable. But other than those things, along with, you could argue, and again, this actually goes against that clip from Lauren from years ago, that outside of the prison system, women are more likely to get raped, right? But other than that, and I believe that's probably true, but then when men get raped, they're not going to report it most of the time. So it's even hard to say how far that goes. But the issue is, women do not have problems that are at that same level. It's not even close. Men are the ones that are disadvantaged. Men have real, actual, tangible reasons to point to for not wanting to deal with women for the most part anymore. Whatever exceptions that men want to make for that on the individual level, they can. It depends on what you still want out of your life as a man, right? If you desperately have to have children, and that's the only thing that can make you feel fulfilled like a man, or as a man, I should say, then I can understand, all right, you either do the surrogacy thing, or if you have to have a woman along with that, then you get married and you try to, get her to sign a prenup and you hope for the best, realizing that everything else might be sacrificed just so that you can reproduce. And I'm not trying to shame those men. I'm really not. I get it. If you can't motivate yourself other than to either have children or to try to live with a woman, right, and make things work for her, because otherwise you just have no motivation to do anything, and you can't come up with something else that makes you, work at a high level, it makes you motivated. I get that in some cases those guys are not going to be able to go MGTOW. But for the majority of men, they don't have to have kids and they don't need to get married, and they're better off not doing so in the West today because of real tangible reasons. Unlike feminists who basically do just have this entitlement mentality and hate men. That's the difference.
They're hurt people that think it'll make life easier to just hate an entire gender. And that is an explanation for why ever their relationship or communication broke down with the other sex, because they're just indiscriminately evil.
Nope. In most cases, that's definitely not what a lot of the guys in the manosphere think. They just realize that they've been through the system, and the system itself has discriminated against them in some way, even if it's just the culture where it's like, hey, there was this girl I liked, we went out on a few dates, we had sex a few times, and then I said something or that she didn't like, and she told everybody that I raped her, and I lost my job, and I maybe had to maybe I got arrested and had to prove my innocence, or that she couldn't prove that I was guilty because I wasn't, and I didn't have to do jail time. And in some cases, men do still go to prison, right? I mean, our society is so gynocentric, and that's the type of story that men are sharing with one another that's so powerful, right? The emotions are there, right? What we could call red pill rage, that's real, right? But at the core are valid reasons for not wanting to deal with women at that level anymore. For saying, you know what, I'm going to determine my life goals without women, and then if I want to have a girlfriend or not, or want to have female friends or not, or want to deal with certain women in my family or not, I get to make those decisions based on my life goals now. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't men that hate women, that there aren't men that think that all women are evil, but that is not the majority of men who are either MRAs or MGTOW, or a part of the men's community in some capacity. They realize that we have a fucked up system, and they realize that it's real. You will be discriminated against in these situations. It's pretty much just a matter of time. And again, just very quickly, although I don't seem to really say anything quickly, you talk about the men that have been in happy relationships with women, or Lauren has here. She did that in the first part of the response that I made. Okay, what does that look like? Because the vast majority of men that I see in long-term relationships, again, they just do whatever their wives want. She wears the pants in the family. It's a yes, dear, happy wife, happy life type of thing. And there's no way in the world that I want to be like that guy in the future. No matter what else happens, I don't want to be in that situation. And so again, I don't think that there are that many good examples where men have invested in a healthy relationship with a woman that turned out to actually be good for him in terms of actually having an overall positive effect. Usually there's a lot more risk and liability. The man is pretty much whipped, and everybody thinks that's okay because our gynocentric culture puts men in these situations. So again, real issues on men's side versus things that are pretty much made up among the feminists. But Lauren and Zerse seems to go along with this, have this idea that it must be the same on both sides, because that's the only way they can justify essentially saying that MGTOW men or men that are, saying don't deal with women anymore are just as much of a problem as the feminist women. They have to have this false assumption to base everything off of rather than acknowledging gynocentrism. They could dance around gynocentrism and point out all these issues that men have and then say, oh, but women have issues too. That's just their way of not acknowledging that the system is not the same on both sides.
And they're just demons walking on Earth, right? That's a very easy, simple explanation for their...
Yeah.
That's a simple, false explanation for the way things are, because that reaches the conclusion that you want to reach, rather than actually looking at men having a valid sort of series of reasons for not wanting to get married, have kids, or deal with women in that way anymore.
I'm looking back and I've noticed lots of people love to work on different binaries and really like polarize different positions. And this kind of just is just a different one of the whole like liberal conservative thing, now man versus woman thing. What really concerns me, I think, looking at like society like going forward and into the future, is the fact that like I said earlier, society is built on all of us working together. And there are
No, it's really not now. A functional, healthy society is built on everyone working together, I guess, in theory. But again, that's the problem with pretty much this whole conversation, isn't it? It's all about theory. It's all about, well, this could be how things are between men and women. But in reality, it's not that way. In reality, we have a very gynocentric system. Again, asking a woman to make you a sandwich or get you a beer is considered at least somewhat sexist. The typical response is, you can make your own sandwich. You can get your own beer. but yet expecting a man to pay child support for kids that he may not have even wanted to have and may not even get to see now, well, he needs to do that or he's a deadbeat dad. That is how skewed something like gender roles have become. Women are not expected to do anything for men, and yet men are still measured as providers and protectors. How is that the same on both sides? What issues do women have that are the equivalent of that level of discrimination? There aren't any, because we live in a gynocentric culture. And so, again, this idea of just dividing people, all that's true, right? Like, there's identity politics galore all over now. But again, a lot of it comes down to it's real for men to be discriminated against by the system. It's not real in terms of the patriarchy theory nonsense. One is valid and the other isn't, so it's not the same.
Not very many channels I've noticed about us trying to work together, particularly like men and women. There's no like.
Oh, and the other point I was going to make is we live in a society that's based on usury, not working together. We live in a society now that is the opposite of that. Again, theoretically, it'd be nice to say that we have a society that's based on working together, or should, but we don't. We have a society that's basically built on using good people, especially good men. That's the society that we have now. It's a society that basically uses men up and gets them to do things that aren't in their interest by pretending that those things are the right thing to do, and then throws those men away and then expects those men to never learn their lesson and to just keep coming back for more. And a lot of men will, unfortunately, because they think they're doing the right thing, or they think it's in their interest to continue to get married and all that. And they never, for a variety of reasons, learn that that's not really a healthy way of going about things, probably. Again, unless you just can't live for anything else, like, you have to have kids or whatnot. So again, guys, this is just sort of a nonsense, right? It's just based on this idea of how we'd like things to be, or the theoretical framework that Lauren and Zerse have kind of set up here, that has no basis in reality because they don't acknowledge gynocentrism.
Like, there's no like holding your hand out there and saying, all right, listen, ladies, you need us and we need you. Like, it's like we got.
Why do we need women? They don't do anything in relationships. Again, it's sexist to basically expect anything from a woman these days, supposedly. And yes, there is a simple answer to that at a biological level, to reproduce. But why do we need to reproduce as men when we don't have any sort of reasonable guarantee of continued access to those children to actually raise them? And, this goes back to something that Bitchute probably said the most, right? Like he's the one that made the most salient point about this, is if you can be kicked out of the family home so easily as the man, then they're not really your children in the first place in a practical sense. They're children that you give to her. You can give a woman children, but they're not really your kids in a practical sense. And again, if a man wants to do that because it's like, hey, I'm going to take the chance, I have to reproduce, I have to fill my sort of genetic obligation by biological imperative by doing that. I mean, I do get it if that's really where you stand on it, but for most men, that's not the right choice to make, really, because you're going to have such an uphill battle. You're not going to get any benefit in return. You're going to be essentially in a home where the woman is the authority figure because the state and the culture places her there, and that's at best if you get to stay in the home at all. So again, we do not live in a society that's based on working together anymore. We live in a society that's based on usury of men, good people, but good men in particular.
We gotta act right. We gotta help each other. I mean, because you gotta really think about it, for a second, right? Look at any family. You don't have children by yourself. You need a man to have a child. You need a woman to have a child. You need each other, and whether.
But again, that all goes away and falls by the wayside when men can be kicked out of the family home so easily anyway, right? That doesn't really add up a whole lot when men don't necessarily have a positive role to play in all that, other than to take responsibility for a unit that he doesn't have authority over. There's very little point in doing that. I mean, again, unless it's what you absolutely feel like you have to do.
The woman has to carry the child for a long time. It's the man you're going to expect to protect the child after he's been born and is a kid and running around the house. Like, we need each other. And there should be a strong respect for the fact that men are men and women are women. To me, at least, I'm thinking.
And the government is the government, and the culture is the culture. And those elements have made it to where you no longer have a system where men and women can really work together effectively. You now have a system where the woman holds pretty much all of the cards. And again, there's really very little positive role for a man to play in that unless he absolutely feels like he has to have a family. Instead, men can just decide, especially when sex is so easy to get these days, right? If you know that you're not going to have kids, then you can get sex outside of a relationship. Not that I think that that's morally correct. I really don't, but you can if that's really what you want. And yet, at the same time, what else do women do for men other than dispense sex and make babies? I'm not saying it has to be that way, but that's clearly where things are once you look at how one-sided and how basically anti-male our society and our culture actually is. This whole idea of a balanced system just does not, again, it doesn't pan out in reality.
Well, this is what I find so interesting about people like this Undead Chronicle guy or Sandman MGTOW or...
Yeah, it's Undead Chronic. He's had like 14 channels or something like that, and she still gets the name wrong. But again, if she's never really watched his stuff, that's fine. And
crazy feminists.
Yeah, there's no
think,
reaching out.
Well, no, I think they actually speak to what you're saying right now, that women and men need each other. Because if you were actually...
Women and men only need each other when there's some sort of positive experience there that's possible, or at least plausible, right? Again, the risks and liabilities that men take upon themselves by trying to get in a conventional relationship with a woman, in most cases, are just not justified. And you don't have to hate women or think that women are evil or the problem, they're the sort of decisive factor in everything that's wrong in the world. They are the decisive factor in several things that are wrong, but you don't have to have that attitude. You don't have to be jaded against women at all, really. You just have to realize kind of where things stand and why it is that you are probably not going to participate in a system that just basically wants to use you.
Going your own way. If you were full on MGTOW, right, you wouldn't think about women anymore. You'd live your happy life. You'd move on. But
Well, I've talked about this before, and so have a lot of other people within the community. She does have a point there, right? For the most part in your own life, once you realize you're just not going to date or you're not going to get married or whatnot, you are probably just not going to think about women, or you're not going to deal with women at the same level, to the same degree or extent. That's true. But there are several factors that go into that, and I've discussed those factors before. One, right, most men are still sexually attracted to women. And so basically through no fault of our own, we can be doing our own thing and, thinking about a project that we're working on and saying, we're not going to get married now. Oh, look, there's a woman with a nice rack. We're still going to notice that, right? We're still going to notice women that we find sexually attractive. And so we do have to reinforce this sort of control over our biology so that we don't think, oh, she's hot. Maybe she's different than the other women out there. And then you start thinking in a way that's going to lead you right back into making a negative decision, right? That's going to lead you right back into a situation where if she doesn't like you, she can say that you're harassing her. If she does like you, then, maybe you end up taking her out on dates and spending money because she's the type of woman that ends up, wanting you to pay for dates. Like, there's all kinds of negative situations that you can get into. Or, hey, I like this woman that I work with. She's attractive. But guess what? You have to remind yourself that Me Too is still a thing. You've got to be aware of all that kind of stuff. I haven't really talked about that much in this response, but again, it doesn't matter whether you think men and women should work together. As long as Me Too is still a thing, men are going to keep their distance in the workplace. Why wouldn't they? Right? They're not going to... The smarter men, the men that are recognizing what's actually happening in the greater society, they're going to realize they're not going to date women they work with anymore. If they're dating women at all, they're not going to put themselves in that position. So, again, this idea of just working together is based on this false assumption or set of assumptions that we live in a society where things are balanced between men and women, and it's just not true. The reasons for men not wanting to deal with this are just, they're actually based in reality, and the reasons for feminists to, blame men for all their problems is just based on more or less their fantasy, I don't want to take accountability for myself type of stuff. And again, just to sort of wrap up the point about MGTOW guys not dealing with women, most of us are not going to live, in a shack in the forest somewhere and never have contact with women again. And so we do still have to have sort of a game plan for how to deal with women. If women are actually interested in us or want to be our friends or whatever, we have to know whether we're going to accept that or not. And a lot of guys are going their own way, or they are MRAs or whatnot, are still going to have girlfriends, right? Not all of us are necessarily, really including myself. I don't know whether I'll ever have a girlfriend again. Probably not. But I'm not flat out saying with 100% certainty that it's not going to happen either. I think a lot of other guys are sort of in that same boat to some degree. They realize that, they may want to have female friends or be willing to do that, but they have to vet them very carefully. Or maybe they don't want to have female friends, right? Maybe they want to pump and dump. Again, I wouldn't really support that, but that is what it is. So you're still going to be sexually attracted to women. You're still going to deal with women. This idea, it's almost idealistic that you can just avoid women completely. That's just not going to happen. But there is a point to be made in terms of not dealing with women nearly as extensively once you really are going your own way, so to speak.
The opposite of love is not hate, right? It's indifference. If you hate someone, you still have a lot of emotion for them.
Yes, I've made videos about that. Like, the most popular video that I ever did on YouTube was basically about that. For whatever reason, that video just took off. But yeah, that's absolutely true. I agree with Lauren there. I mean, but again, the whole point, the bigger picture is just that doesn't change anything. Whether you find women sexually attractive and hate them at the same time, I mean, that's totally possible. So, but again, men that are going their own way probably are not going to deal with women as extensively, right? Especially over time. They're going to distance themselves more from female circles or where women participate more. But still, you're probably going to be attracted to them. You're going to have to deal with them at some level. And then you're going to have to come up with a solution for how you deal with women in your family, right? Like, to completely exclude all women from your life is not going to happen in most cases. Even for guys that are supposedly, a very hardcore MGTOW, if you want to describe them that way. It's still probably not going to get to that point.
It's when you're indifferent and just don't care anymore. That's when I think it's truly dangerous. The fact that these men are so so angry and so worked up. It's so much internal frustration over, like, women, why are you like this? Even if it is just kind of a narrative or false perception they've sold themselves. They're so frustrated.
It's because they do want women, though.
Yes,
I think,
exactly.
And that's the painful part of it all is and they don't want to admit it.
Actually, no, probably not. Again, a lot of it is sharing our experiences about how we were pretty much discriminated against in a variety of ways. How a relationship we were in was totally one-sided, or how it is that, a lot of these guys have been with a lot of different women, and it pretty much always works out the same way, right? I mean, we talk about things that we've learned about male and female nature and how we're different from one another, but a lot of it is our experiences with the overall society, the legal system, and the culture. And what we figured out is that, wait a second, there are these things in common regardless of the type of women that we dated. Yes, there are some women that won't treat you poorly, at least not to start off with, but look at the divorce rate. Right? That's not just guys picking the wrong women. Half of marriages end in divorce, right? It's absurd to think that all those guys just picked the wrong woman. And women initiate divorce 2/3 of the time or more. So, and again, you look at how the laws are written, you look at gender roles, it's just so very one-sided in favor of women, and men are figuring this out and choosing to participate in this sort of system of usury less and less often, or in a less extensive way.
But I'll tell it straight up. They do want women. They want to be with women. There's this one guy. I don't.
Of course, yeah. I don't really think that's necessarily true. In some cases, it may be that guys still want to have sex with women, or they may wish that a sort of a family that they wanted to have in a different world, in a different universe, might have actually happened. They might have actually been able to find a good woman supposedly to settle down with and have those kids and have the family. But guess what? They figured out that that's not going to happen because you are probably more likely to get kicked out of that family unit. You're probably more likely to only be, even if the family unit stays intact, you're going to be a secondary force in terms of your authority, because the woman's going to wear the pants in the family because she knows that she can just divorce you and take the house and take half your stuff anytime she wants to, right? Guys may still fantasize, basically, more or less, about what they could have had in a different system, while still realizing that, we don't want to be with women as they are today in this environment.
I don't know, you wouldn't know him, but his name's Donovan Sharp.
Mhm.
And he brought this woman on his live stream. I'll never get this. And she's like, well, why are you
Yeah, I don't think Donovan Sharp is an MRA or a MGTOW. I think it's fair to say. I don't remember watching much of his content, but I think he's sort of a tradconish, PUA-ish type of person. So might not be a good example when you're primarily talking about MGTOW and MRAs, because I don't think Donovan Sharp really fits into that category. So even if he wanted to be with women, I don't see how that's relevant.
an asshole? Why are you acting like that? And he replies, I don't want to be this way. This is what women taught me works. This is the way I have to be to get respect from women. And it's like a lot of these guys, and my problem with these YouTube videos and the different responses I've been seeing, like to the TikTok girls and whatnot, is there's no like there's a huge lack of nuance for one, but there's no reaching out and saying, like, there's no coming to the middle where it's like, okay, your experiences have been your experiences with men, but we need to reevaluate that and move forward doing something different.
I agree. We need to move forward and do something different, like walking away from this whole thing as much as we think is necessary. And that's the thing about this, guys. There is an answer to what you could do to get men to have healthy relationships with women, and that answer is you must dismantle gynocentrism. You must totally reverse the processes and institutions today that discriminate against men. You must completely get rid of no-fault divorce. You must get rid of one-sided reproductive rights, which I guess, to be fair, in the United States, we just took one step towards that. But I have no doubt that we're never really going to get to a point where men actually have reproductive rights at the same level as women. You have to completely reverse one-sided gender roles so that women actually do something in relationships again in return for the expectation that men are going to help take care of them. Right? There has to be mutual obligation with those gender roles. Or, technically speaking, I don't think this could ever happen, but you could make the case for everything in a relationship really is just 50-50. But again, the problem is women choose the guys that have already been successful. Women don't run the race with you, as it's said in the men's community oftentimes. Women don't run the race with you. They wait at the finish line and pick the winners, and then they want things to be 50-50, right? As I've mentioned, it's kind of a boring analogy, but you have your sort of deductible versus copay type of thing, right? If you have a bill from the hospital for $10,000 and the deductible on that is $6,000, and then you have a 50% copay, that means you're paying 80% of that overall bill. You're paying the first $6,000 and then $2,000 out of the last $4,000. Now, that's a boring mathematical example to use, but that's basically what 50-50 relationships are, right? The man has to invest so much more before the woman even gets half, and then she can just quit at any time and take half your stuff if you get married or you live together and she makes an accusation of domestic violence and so forth. So even the whole 50-50 thing is not really genuine in most cases, in other words. But the point is that in order to actually fix things, in order to make it to where men should want to take this seriously, not only do you have to actually acknowledge gynocentrism instead of having this joke of a theoretical framework that things are actually balanced between men and women today, which is just, again, I think I've made a pretty good case for why that's not true. But you also have to just totally change the way things are done so that they're not gynocentric anymore, more or less. You have to make things fair between men and women again. You have to level the playing field. If you're not going to do that, then there's really no point, is there? Now, I think I'm going to make a third part of this video, guys, because there's a couple more points, overall sort of conclusions that I want to reach that I haven't quite touched on yet, and this video is already going long. So I'm going to finish this up in a part 3.